Welcome back to the Cruise Elite Podcast. I'm here with Tony. Tony, what's up, man?
What's going on? I saw you take a sip of something in a mason jar, and it was like a dark green color.
Dude, I was going to talk to you about this.
I'm curious what it is.
This is a funny story. And it's especially funny because I saw that recently you were just talking with Jordan about green supplements.
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, full disclosure.
He was not pleased with me.
Yeah, so full disclosure, I share the same opinion. Like over the years, I've just been like, come on, green supplements, like, I don't know. It just seems like it's not necessary. You know what I mean? Plus, for me personally, I've never been a big supplement guy. I just always feel like it's more important to be able to get educated enough to understand how to have a diet that's going to support your needs, and maybe if certain things aren't available, sure, supplement them. I can see how that can be important, for sure. But I've never been a huge supplement guy. I'm like more of a foodie.
Yeah, fix it in the diet first.
Yeah. Try to get what you need through, healthy nutritional habits. So not that long ago, maybe, I don't know, 5 months ago, a friend of mine dropped off a green supplement literally on my doorstep. It was like a neighbor of mine, good buddy too. We've talked about him, Tom, right? In one of the first podcasts when we were talking about one of my mentors, Tom. And he's like, hey, I got this supplement for you. Try it. Let me know what you think. And I looked at it and I was like, a green supplement. Probably not going to try it. And it sat on my counter for like 3 months. And then my wife, Alicia, was like, I'll try it. And she's more of a supplement person, I guess. She's had more experience with supplements than I have. Well, she never tried it. And I was like, well, I should try it because at the time I was having some like weird fatigue issues later in the day. I was like, I'm deficient in something. Let's just throw a Hail Mary and I'll see if this helps. And so I had this supplement once and I felt the difference and I was like, so try it again. And so I started having it pretty routinely and I'll be damned, it's actually been quite useful for me. So now I got to kind of eat my boot a little bit on what I've said about, green supplements. But at the same time, I'm at a time in my life where I can understand how getting some kind of support through supplements is useful for me just because of the additional stress load in my life, basically since becoming a dad. So I feel a difference.
Interesting.
Yeah, I feel a difference. And so I keep having it because my buddy Tom keeps dropping it off to me. So he gets it and he basically uses half of it. And then
argue with free,
Yeah. And then he's got another one and he comes over to the house and he gives it to me. And so I'm like, yeah, I'm going to keep going with this. So I'm like still kind of experimenting with it, but it's been good actually.
So let me ask you this, like,
Yeah.
do you almost treat it as like an energy supplement in terms of its effect on you?
I don't. So put it this way. I'm not planning on drinking it for like my workout, so to speak. I generally have it between like 9 and maybe 11 o'clock, during the day. And in my mind, I'm like, well, let me, maybe that will help me later on in the afternoon. Because that's when I was, feeling some fatigue that shouldn't have been there. Yeah. So, I mean, that's just the habit I built around it. I'm not sure if when I take it really is the determining factor for it.
So this is where assessments come in, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And I've been trying to pay attention. It seems like it helps me in the afternoon. It really does. That's why I've kind of decided to stick with it.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd spend money on it though. I don't know if I would go that far.
It's tricky, man. It's tricky. And it reminds me of our conversation last time where you were saying, everything works sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like maybe this is just that one ingredient that you need right now for whatever reason, but for Gen Pop it might not be, right?
Yeah.
It's really hard to parse these things out.
It is. And so I mix it with I mix it with a homemade electrolyte drink, and then I add additional salt to it, because adding salt, like I do really well on additional salt in my diet. Like I just feel a difference. It really helps me, and so I add that, and yeah, so it's kind of a mix of a few things.
Yeah, I saw you do like water with like OJ and
Yeah,
something else,
yeah.
salt
So
and
Alicia makes Alicia makes a really good electrolyte drink. It's basically, I don't know the exact proportions. I'll have to ask her about it, but it's basically like coconut water with a little bit of OJ, a little bit of maple syrup. It's got additional salt in it, lemon or lime, that kind of a
mm-hmm.
thing,
Mm-hmm.
and it's awesome.
Sounds yummy.
Yeah, it's really good, and I really lean on it on those super hot, humid days where I'm losing a lot more. I'm sweating a lot more, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can feel that it definitely helps me, especially on those days.
Just to bring the question or bring the topic closer to neuroscience for a second, does hydration play a role in threat response?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, the way I look at it is over the years of assessing clients in person, and back when we had our studio where we did all of our one-on-one work. I mean, we were getting a lot of clients who were getting out of work, in the afternoon, coming over and doing their sessions with us. And it was quite evident that if their nutrition wasn't in check throughout the day and they hadn't eaten meals frequently enough, or perhaps they weren't as hydrated as they should have been, the assessment part of what we were doing, if we were working on really specific issues, could get a little chaotic, meaning the results would vary.
Yeah, something would work one day and another day it would have the opposite effect or no
Yeah,
effect or
yes, and
yeah.
you could even see those changes in session. So you might see that a person is assessing a certain way throughout the training session, but then all of a sudden that starts to change. And a lot of times that's an indication that their fuel in the moment is compromised. And so that's being expressed through these kind of chaotic and changing results.
Mm-hmm.
As the coach, it was always a clue to me, because if I saw that pattern a lot with people, I could start to, in my mind, be like, well, okay, we're probably going to have to prioritize conversations around fuel, because this person just isn't getting what they need to sustain that homeostasis that's needed for getting truthful assessments. That's
Yeah.
really what it is. Like it's when you see that varying up and down responses, it tells you that there's some internal chaos going on, and we have to tame that with the right drills and the right fuel.
Mm-hmm. And generally fuel, you consider fuel like breathing, nutrition,
Totally, yeah. So,
hydration,
yep,
sleep perhaps.
all of that, exactly,
Yeah.
all of that. And
Okay.
in for like in session stuff, if I see that happening, that pattern, I'm usually leaning on breathing drills immediately,
Mm-hmm.
because the right breathing drill is the fastest way to support somebody with fuel. And usually the category of breathing drill that I like to use is what we call CO2 drills or air hunger drills. And those are the exercises that increase your CO2 by way of breathing slower than you normally would and feeling that air hunger response. Or, interestingly enough, not breathing at all,
Mm-hmm.
exhaling, holding your breath, and then moving in a breathless state so that air hunger feeling comes up. And then eventually you stop and you recover your breathing through your nose. That style of breathing drill is usually the thing that I go to when
Mm-hmm.
people need fuel support in the moment. The other thing is, and I say this all the time to our members, if you're somebody that's getting those varied responses, having an electrolyte drink on hand that you're sipping on during your training session, your workouts, your rehab, whatever you're doing, does wonders.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when I first caught on to this, back when I was doing more muscle testing, like manual muscle testing with people. I still do it occasionally, but just not as much, because I'm not doing as much in person
Mm-hmm.
training work with people right now. But I would have people fail a bunch of muscle tests, and then I started catching on to this, I'd literally have them take a sip of orange juice or whatever they had on them, and then like 2 minutes later, all the muscle tests they'd pass. And it's like when you take somebody that's kind of deprived in their simple sugars, right, to help support them in the moment, you start giving them that fuel, and all of a sudden things start working better.
Yeah. I mean, this is kind of the perfect intro into today's topic, right?
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about the concept of clarifying the map.
Right.
So many problems that you've encountered are due to some sort of sensory deficit, right? Visual deficit, a vestibular deficit, proprioceptive deficit,
Right.
scar tissue, something that's depriving the brain of an accurate or a consistent reading of something that's going on. So we've done the neuroscience of that. We talked about it in depth. We've gone, and if you haven't listened to the previous episodes, starting with the neural hierarchy, I recommend you go back and check that out because we really do a deep dive into those. But today I thought it would be really good if we start talking about what the average Jane and Joe can do to start clarifying the map. Maybe they
Yeah.
don't have a specific problem, maybe they do, but it seems to me that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. Sipping on an electrolyte drink because you might have a fuel issue or doing
Right.
a breathing drill are great examples in my mind of things that anybody can do and assess, of course, but to just start helping their body and their mind do what they need to do to perform. So I kind of wanted to open the gate to you and ask, for general population, for
Yeah.
someone that's just interested in performing better, feeling better, being more active, what are some of the low hanging fruit that like they might not be getting from the fitness industry at large?
Right. That's great. So the first, I think where I want to start is just by saying when we talk about clarifying the map, we're talking about multiple different maps, right? In this scenario, oftentimes you'll hear me talk about clarifying the proprioceptive map,
Mm-hmm.
meaning the map that your brain uses to understand where your body is in space.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're going to be using map as we're going to be looking at it in a little bit more of a broader way because we have so many different senses that we can train. And so, really, when we say map, we're talking about the proprioceptive system, the visual system, the vestibular system, all these different maps that you have that if you're experiencing any kind of blurring, as we would say, that
Mm-hmm.
can potentially drive up threat levels and decrease our performance. So when I think about what's the lowest hanging fruit in terms of building better map clarity, my mind immediately goes to joint mobility. So
Hmm.
it it is such a useful practice. It's unbelievable. Honestly, like out of everything that I teach, and we go deep, as you know, into all these neurologic systems, and we do talk about, you know, a hierarchy, and that hierarchy is more based on how much sensory input our brain may be taking in from these particular systems. Well, when you think about what the lowest hanging fruit is, training the proprioceptive system is the lowest hanging fruit because it's the easiest for somebody to do without needing any kind of specificity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's joint mobility in my mind. And that is honestly a little hard for some people to understand at first because mostly in the general population, the only thing that people really know in terms of a mobility practice is stretching, just traditional stretching.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm actually talking about is different than traditional stretching. It's about moving your joints through their fullest available range of motion. Okay. And so in our programs, we have several different mobility programs. The first one, we start by teaching you how to move every joint in your body. And there's no equipment needed, which is also cool.
Mm-hmm.
And you literally learn how to create these complex shapes with your joints. A lot of the movements resemble curved lines, circles, and even figure eights. And maybe we'll come back to that because there's reasons why we use those shapes. And then after that, we have another program that then starts to add different loads. And the main load that we use is resistance by way of a resistance band. So it's a band loaded joint mobility approach. Now we have a third program coming this fall. And it's actually a good time to mention it because we're talking about building map clarity. One of the most important parts of the map when you're building out your proprioceptive map is to be able to move your body at varied speeds, right? So you never want to practice mobility at only one speed. And if you look at all the different methodologies out there that practice different forms of stretching, there's lots of different kinds of stretching. Usually the one thing that they always have in common is that there's either no movement or very slow movement. It's like we kind of just think that flexibility and mobility training should be done slow. But that's not the case all the time because your mobility in the moment and your motor control is actually very speed dependent. Whatever position you can get your body into at a slow speed is not necessarily the same position you can access at a fast speed. It's completely different. So we have a third program coming that is all about clarifying your proprioceptive map using different speeds. And so we do a lot of the same drills that a person would experience in the first and second programs, but now it's about training them at slow, medium, and fast speeds. Totally different because guess what? Coordination is speed specific too.
Yeah.
So you can be super coordinated through a certain range of motion moving at a slow speed. And then as soon as you add speed to that, you're now not as coordinated and you can't access the same range of motion.
Interesting. So anecdotally, I've got this knee and I noticed like I've been very deliberate about how I'm taking stairs just because I want to engage the musculature in a certain way that I was avoiding when I was staying off of my knee. And so I kind of take the stairs kind of slow and it can kind of trigger some pain. And I realize if I just take the stairs at a normal speed, there's none of that. It's just fine. And it's the same range of motion and the same, the same load, which is me. Anyway, so I just thought that was interesting to mention.
Yeah. So you know what I just immediately thought of? It's interesting because slow speed is more energy expensive than fast speed, even though you would think the opposite when it comes to just like everyday movements like that. In fact, in the years of assessing people and learning about their health histories and the different complaints that they have, one of the things that I have always noticed is that the population of people that seems to be in the most chronic pain seems to be individuals that they've sort of become extremely fast with their movement. Like you watch them walk and they look like they're always trying to race somebody. It's just that, it's not an absolute thing for sure, but this is just observationally, I've noticed that those are the clients that typically are always moving quicker. I think that from an, conserving energy kind of standpoint, we start to move very differently because, of what we have going on. And it's kind of interesting how moving quick, even though it can be more threatening because you are moving faster, it takes less energy.
But less time under tension, less time putting all my weight on that one leg with a bent knee, right?
Yeah. I've had a client in the past who they were such a fuel case. It was so difficult to help them. And we were trying
fuel case. I like that term.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, man, you don't want to be a fuel case. Trust me, because it means that basically nothing is sticking. Nothing is even if you have the right set of exercises, nothing seems to be sticking and results are constantly changing. This was one of the weirder experiences for me because I realized one day that taking this individual through all of our basic joint mobility exercises, which we generally start people at a slow speed because that is a good place to start. Like you're trying to teach someone how to move better, and with higher quality. So, of course, you kind of start at a slow speed. Well, what I figured out in working with this person is that me constantly having them move at a slow speed was just eating up all their energy in the
Mm-hmm.
moment, and their body just couldn't handle that. So all of a sudden we switched our joint mobility practice to all fast. And they were like afraid at first. They're like, I can't move fast like with these exercises. But we're like, all right, we'll just reduce range of motion, keep you safe when you do it. Moving quickly changed everything. It gave us an entry point to do all the drills. And rather than something hurting as we
Mm-hmm.
were trying to move through that slow speed and she didn't have the energy for it, she's able to do fast. And so now we had an entry point. We could begin to move, and then little by little, slow
Slow it
things
down.
down over time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's awesome. So what would be a good example of just to give people an idea of a joint mobility drill that you might use?
sure. So, well, my famous knee circles.
Mm-hmm.
I show it a lot on Instagram,
I've
YouTube.
been doing those a lot lately,
Nice,
by the way.
nice, great. I just love them. It's one of my favorite drills for sure. But imagine this. So, if you're new to this concept of joint mobility, with a knee circle, you are in a forward 45 lunge. It's kind of like not a super deep lunge, but just kind of athletic. And the forward leg is the active leg, and the goal is to bring the knee through a circle. So, usually, what people immediately say is, that's impossible. The knee is a hinge joint. It can't create a circle. And, well, it's a hinge joint, yes, but it also has to be able to handle a little bit of rotation because you actually have a rotational ability with your knee. It's just not like a shoulder or a hip, right? Your tibia rotates, and your knee has to be able to handle torsional load.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why this knee circle is such a great exercise for building healthy knees. So the idea is you're taking your knee through a circular motion in this lunge position, but your hip and your foot and your ankle are involved to help you
Right.
access the shape of a circle. So, for example, if I'm going to do the inside of this circle, my hip has to internally rotate,
Mm-hmm.
my foot has to pronate,
Mm-hmm.
and that allows me to access the inside of the circle. To get the outside of the circle, my hip then has to outwardly rotate, okay, and my foot and my ankle has to move as well. So there are other joints involved, but you're thinking about tracing the circle with the knee. And
Mm-hmm.
what this does is it brings your knee through a very awkward range of motion that most people never train. Most people train very linearly when it comes to knee health. They treat that joint like it's a hinge. You can flex it, you can extend it. And that's
Mm-hmm.
how they strengthen it, and that's how they mobilize it. And that's still useful and that's still important. But you have to train your knee to be able to handle those torsional loads so that your tendons and your ligaments and your muscles have the capacity to handle awkward ranges of motion so that when life forces you into those ranges of motion, you're able to respond because you have a map for it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we're back to the map. If you don't train certain ranges of motion, now you don't have a map for it. There's consequences to that if life forces you into a certain position and you don't have the map for it.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also a disuse consequence to that because, in terms of how your brain is viewing your body, those are the blurry areas,
Mm-hmm.
right? And those blurry areas of the map drive up threat levels, increase pain. Sometimes people just have pain from blurry maps, right? So that's part of the idea behind map clarity. So that's an example of a great joint mobilization for the knee. And
Yeah.
they're all similar. They're all similar
Right.
because guess what? If you look at the joints in our body, there's a way to move most of those joints in a somewhat circular fashion.
Mm-hmm.
And that's typically what we're doing in the program is creating those curved lines when we mobilize joints.
And this goes back to the concept of the movement box, right?
Oh, I was hoping you were going to
So we're
mention
gonna
that.
we're expanding the movement box, and when we're never using a joint in its full range of motion, we're shrinking the movement box.
That's it. That's literally it. That's how I think about it. Right? You
Yeah.
don't want your movement box to shrink, and so we're just training. Training is all about building our movement options, right? And the more options you have, the safer your brain feels. The safer your brain feels, the more efficiently you can move through the world.
Hmm.
And that's literally how I think about training.
Yeah, and this is why I think when I was doing mostly like barbell strength training, and then I started to incorporate some mat Pilates or some yoga, I felt like I got so much out of that, like small accessory kind of incorporation. And in
Yeah.
retrospect, now that we've had these conversations, I'm like, oh, because I was doing the same 3, 4 movements over and over and over again with heavier and heavier loads. And I wasn't ever, putting my body in these other positions where my T spine is, twisting, and or where I'm in an awkward lunge pose, or you know what I mean? It
Yeah.
was just, or on the floor even. So it makes sense that that was really useful for my training at that time, right?
I've had the same experience, right? Same experience. So, high school and college, everything I was doing was, more traditional in terms of weightlifting. And even though I was dedicated with my training and I worked really hard, and I would say that my training, even at a high school level, was fairly sophisticated compared to what most people have access to, just because I had great coaches, great instructors, and we learned how to exercise in a smart way. It was really cool.
Hmm.
I actually had classes that I took in high school that were built around learning how to exercise. Very few
Hmm.
people can say that. So it was pretty cool. I had the exposure to that kind of thing early on, but most of my training was still very linear,
Hmm.
still very linear. And so it's interesting because when I got to college and I started changing my thought process and getting into the Burdanko method, as we talked about in the past, the Burdanko method was the first experience for me where training was no longer as linear. It was very multi directional and it incorporated speeds. That's actually where the speed change part of our philosophy comes from, is the Burdanko method. And everything that we did it forwards, we did it backwards, we traveled side to side. There was a lot of coordination involved in it. So you had to really think about what you were doing, and there was a lot of cognitive load to it. That was my first experience with getting out of that linear type of training that we kind of get boxed into when we're in the weight room.
Hmm.
So early on, I actually had good exposure to those different things. But here's the thing that I find interesting, because I considered myself to have a pretty good map because of all that stuff. And I think I did. But it still wasn't enough, right? Because I still found myself with chronic pain later in
Hmm.
life, starting kind of in my late 20s. After my athletic career was over and stuff, I just like all these little aches and pains were creeping up, and I didn't know what to do about it. Kind of exhausted my resources. And when I eventually got into learning about joint mobility, even the joint mobility was super novel to my brain and body. And I immediately started getting results in terms of pain management. Like it
Hmm.
was like helping me with pain a ton. And I could tell that my movement quality was improving from learning how to move all the joints in my body. It was
And
just a great experience.
this is why I love calling it low hanging fruit, because you were athletic, a wrestler and a strength athlete and a coach, and had a lot of physical literacy. It's
Yes,
not like you were just a couch potato for
right.
30 years and then all of a sudden started doing this stuff. And it still helped you because you were putting yourself into ranges of motion that your body just hadn't been trained in.
Totally. It was still novel. It really
Yeah.
was. I remember going to that first Z Health course where I started learning about joint mobilizations, and I still remember doing the simplest, silliest looking joint mobility drill called a toe pull.
Okay.
And a toe pull is a mobilization for the middle part of the foot. So there's some bones, some joints on the top of the foot, and they're called your cuneiforms. And we were doing mobility work to move those bones. And it just looks so seemingly simple. You basically are standing up, you point your foot, you put it behind you, and you put the top surface of your foot, pointed on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And all you do is you basically flex your calf muscle to further point your foot, right? So that point it starts to feel like a stretch on the top of your foot. And then your stance leg, the one that all your weight is on, you just gently change your level. I mean, like you dip your level like 2 or 3 inches. And when you do that, it intensifies the stretch on the front part of your foot. Because remember, your foot's behind you, it's pointed, it's kind of leveraged into the ground. And so you're using an active component by contracting your calf muscle to further point your foot. And then by changing your level, you're kind of using gravitational force in a way to leverage your foot just right against the ground so that these itty bitty bones in the top of your foot move a little bit. Right. And it just feels like a nice stretch. And then you kind of let off on that tension and come back up to your start position. We started doing these toe pulls, and I had like 3 years of like chronic, right? I blamed it on the QL muscle, like 3 years of chronic back pain and tension that was just kind of always there around my right QL, just like melted away. And I was like, what is happening?
Yeah.
Right. And so it was super exciting because it was the first course I took with Z Health, and we were learning these basic mobilizations, and I was like, wow. And then they started talking about moving at different speeds, and I had already learned all that through Burdenko, and I was like, oh man, I'm in. This is really cool.
This is
cool.
my stuff right
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
Awesome,
Yeah, so
man.
that's, low hanging fruit. You asked about joint mobility, man. It's, in my experience with our clients and members, it fixes about 70% of your problems.
Okay.
If I had to throw a number out there, for most people, provided there's nothing like super specific going on, 70% of your issues typically go away after you adopt joint mobility as a consistent practice.
And I know you have drills on your Instagram and YouTube and whatnot, but like for the programming, that's the Strength Dojo? Or is that?
Yeah,
Okay.
we have it programmed into the Strength Dojo. So here's the layout. So in the Strength Dojo, that's our strength training program. It's not just strength training, but that's where our strength training is housed. And of course, you have a warm up and you have a cool down, and we also have what we call a skills session. So there's other elements built into the program so that it's not just about strength, it's about balance and coordination and mobility.
I
But
want to get to that for sure.
yeah, but the mobility section of every strength workout that we do is in the warm up. So we do a joint mobility warm up. And the reason being is that we are clarifying the proprioceptive map before we go under heavier loads. And it's just a very useful thing to do. Helps people perform better, helps people get into position better, helps a person be a little bit more body aware before they get under a barbell or pick a kettlebell up. And that's all good for safety. And it's also just good for increasing performance.
Yeah.
And then we have the other mobility programs that I talked about, where we have, we have unloaded, then we have band resistance, and then the speed one that we're coming out with in the fall. Those are individual mobility programs that our members will either do as a standalone practice, or they just kind of combine it with their strength training, their Strength Dojo workout, where maybe they're on off days or something, they're doing those mobility programs. Yeah.
Yeah, in my mind, that sounds perfect for adding on to like a different sport or strength practice that you already do.
Yeah.
And just adding a joint mobility
Totally
program to that.
Totally.
I doubt it's that stressful on the body, right?
No, it's not. It's not stressful at all. It's interesting because if you think about, like, the journey with joint mobility, when I think about it, it starts very non-stressful and it's kind of a threat reduction phase.
Mm-hmm.
But then as you get more comfortable with it and you start building out the map, your body will actually require more load in order to keep progressing.
That makes sense.
And so using the same progressive overload principles that we might apply in more traditional strength training, we do the same thing with mobility. So as you get more experienced, you find yourself doing this stuff in more aggressive positions, deeper
Mm-hmm.
positions. You find yourself doing it holding weights or working against band resistance or moving at varied speeds. So it's the same process, right, that we would use for strength training, where you kind of start simple and work to more complex movements that, add different loads. We do the same thing with mobility.
Yeah. So proprioception, I mean, that all just makes a lot of sense to me. Put your body into positions, train it in positions that it hasn't been in, open up your brain's vocabulary and what your body can do and where it can feel safe. And then good things start happening.
I like it. Open up the brain's vocabulary. Nice.
So we talked about the vestibular system. You said balance drills.
Yeah.
Why don't we go there? Is there any kind of low-hanging fruit?
Yeah. So, yeah, literally, when I was out for a walk this morning with Alicia and we were sort of discussing this podcast, I said to her, if I had to think about the lowest hanging fruit, I think I would talk about proprioception first and I talk about the vestibular system second. So you're on
Boom.
it. Yeah. Because I feel like in my mind, if I wouldn't want to go without those two things. And for the general population, if we're talking about just training, not necessarily getting super specific to solve problems,
Yeah.
but just training to become better at moving, the vestibular system is something that I would never want to leave out. And so for our listeners, what I'm talking about, and those of you who have heard some of these past episodes, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But basically, with the vestibular system, we want to be creating balance challenges that move our head, neck, and eyes, and just challenge our body in different positions where we have to stabilize and balance. So we have a skills section built into our Strength Dojo workouts where we put most of the vestibular training work in a general sense, right? These are like drills that are supposed to help you become better at balancing. And so an example would be something called a VOR, where you're looking at a visual target, keeping your
Mm-hmm.
eyes on the visual target. Maybe you're moving your head left and right about 30 degrees in each direction, consistently with no pausing while your eyes stay on that target, but you're balancing on one leg when you do it.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you're moving your head up and down, kind of small movements, but getting both extension and flexion of the neck. Your eyes stay on the target and you're in a challenging lunge position or something where your stance might be a little bit more narrow, and
Mm-hmm.
or maybe you're up on the ball of your foot, right? So we create these different positions for people to do this stuff out of, so that it really challenges your body as you move your head through space, keeping your eyes on the target. This particular example is a reflex. It's called the VOR, vestibulo-ocular reflex. And literally, you have built-in circuitry. Your inner ear, which is what we're talking about when we talk about the vestibular system, has built-in circuitry that allows you to hold your eyes on a target while your head and your neck and your body is in motion. If you didn't have this reflex, it would be like the equivalent of watching a movie that didn't have camera stabilization.
Mm.
And this is just one of many vestibular reflexes, but we train all of them. There's a lot of different ways to do this stuff, and it's a fantastic way to stimulate the vestibular system, which is critical in my mind, because when you get into the neurology of the vestibular system, the pathways that are descending right? The descending pathways from the vestibular organ affect so many different things: stability, balance, blood pressure, breathing. There's so many involved factors there that it builds this case for, if you are interested in not only moving through the world better, right? Being able to move athletically, but being a healthy person, you cannot leave out the vestibular system. So for us, it's absolutely critical that we teach people how to activate it, and that we move people in a way in our training sessions that does that.
Yeah. I don't know why for me, with proprioception, it just feels like other training, right?
Yep.
With vestibular, like the question in my mind is like, how sticky is that? Like if I do these VOR drills for a week,
Hmm.
what can I expect as just like a regular guy?
Yeah. So I think it's varied based on the individual. But you just made me think of something that I wanted to mention to you. You'll find this fascinating. So a friend of mine who is currently a student, she's in a master's program, I think. She she's been learning about applied neurology, has a high interest in it, and she's currently doing some research as she's in school. And one of the things she wanted to research was the vestibular system. To make a very long story short, she did an experiment with a student athlete, and they were testing. I think it was vertical, so the vertical jump. And I'm not going to have the exact numbers, but what I wanted to mention is that the athlete was given several different vestibular drills to practice multiple times a day. I think it was somewhere between 2 and 5 minutes of work per day of vestibular training drills.
Okay.
And it was a variety. I forget what the exact exercises were. I know VOR was one of them, if I remember correctly. And anyways, long story short, this student athlete's vertical improved after 5 days of doing just vestibular work for that short amount of time. I think it was like I think it was over a 3-inch improvement, which I
Hmm.
found really, really cool. No plyometric work, no practicing of the jumping, nothing. Just vestibular work, just working with the vestibular system for roughly 2 minutes a day. I found
Hmm.
that pretty fascinating. And
This is just one athlete.
yeah, she's just one athlete, I think.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to know how much an individual is going to improve, but it's very, very clear to me that people's balance improves a considerable amount from doing this stuff. It's also very clear to me that as soon as you have somebody try this stuff, they learn really quick that their balance is not very good.
Hmm.
When you start to move your head and your eyes, it gets really hard. The general population doesn't really have exposure to this concept, but balance training and stability training are two entirely different things. They do have some overlap, but when we're talking about balance training, you cannot train the balance system without paying respect to the vestibular system. In order to actually train your balance, you have to move your body in a way that activates the vestibular system. Okay. That means you have to move your head and your neck and your eyes, right? Those are big
Hmm.
requirements for training the vestibular system. If you're doing more traditional stability training, I'm not saying that doesn't have value, but what I am saying is it's different than balance work. Even if you're standing on one leg and you feel like you're balancing, your head, your neck, and your eyes are still not moving.
Yeah. If
And
anything, they tell you to like focus on
yes,
a point because it
yeah,
makes it easier. Yeah.
yes. And so you're actually reducing the input to the inner ear when you do traditional stability work. Again, it's not bad, but you don't want to get confused. When you start doing that same kind of work where you're balancing on one leg or you're in a challenging stance of some kind that's hard to stabilize, and now you're moving your eyes and your head, oh my gosh, does it get hard,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when I test people and just kind of show them like, hey, by the way, you don't have to stand on an unstable surface for all of a sudden this to be balance training. Just stand on one leg and move your head. The average person falls over after 3 head movements. They
Hmm.
have to recover their position and they're shocked. They're like, how is that hard? So it's hard to know exactly how much sticks, but it's
Mm-hmm.
very clear to me that people's balance improves, and I wouldn't call it a slow process.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite fast, I feel like. But I will say that balance itself as a quality, your skill with balance is actually one of the most fluctuating expressions of movement that we have. And so what I mean by
Interesting.
that is, let's say that every single morning you did a balance assessment where you stood on one leg and you moved your head right and left. Okay. No visual target. We call it a head saccade. It's also a great vestibular drill. Stand on one leg, move your head side to side. Some days you're going to be like, man, I was a statue. I did awesome. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I got 15 head movements in a row before I toppled over and had to recover position. And other mornings you're going to wake up and you're going to do 4 head movements and fall over and recover position. You will see that kind of fluctuation a lot with people. I
Mm-hmm.
think because balance itself is so intertwined with so many other levels of our health and function, that you'll see that fluctuation. You also see that fluctuation with breathing.
Hmm.
So I use that example because I have talked with a friend of mine about this, and he actually did do a little balance routine daily,
Mm-hmm.
usually in the morning at the same time every day. And he was asking me about it because he was like, man, some days I crush it and some days I feel off. That's normal. That is normal when you're going through that practice. But what you will see is that more consistently, you'll find that you're feeling more stable and more balanced doing those same exercises, and that your skill level is increasing for sure.
Because it's trainable like anything
Like
else.
anything else, anything that you can lose, right? You can use it, train it, and improve it.
Is it true that if you don't use it, you lose it?
Yes. Yes, it is.
So just to go back to the fuel concept,
Yeah.
like if someone were to be training these balance drills diligently and like doing it correctly and in the proper dosage and everything, and it's never getting better, is that the time where they're like, hey, I need to look at another system perhaps,
Yeah,
or
perhaps.
something else might be going on here?
Yeah, it could be another system. It probably usually is fuel. I
Yeah.
mean, put it this way. If you practice something with frequency, it is not normal to not get better at it,
Hmm.
even if it's not good for you. That's what's scary about the brain, right? If we sit in front of a computer screen for 8 hours a day with poor posture and with our visual skills boxed in,
Mm-hmm.
you will get better at doing that,
Mm-hmm.
even though that's not a healthy habit for us, right? That's kind of the said principle kind of rearing its nasty head. Specific adaptation to imposed demand, right? Talk a lot about that in, the strength world, the athletic world, where it simply means whatever you practice, whatever you do with consistency, you will adapt to that and you
Mm-hmm.
will get better at that, even
Mm-hmm.
if it's not healthy for you. So when you're practicing something that is healthy for you and you're practicing it with enough frequency and you're not getting better at it, that is not a normal response to practice. And so that then has to create some larger questions, like, why is your brain and body choosing not to adapt? It doesn't happen, it's not that this happens all the time. It's a little bit more specific when somebody's having some kind of fuel deficit issue.
Yeah, we don't have the budget. We don't have the
Yeah,
resources to do
exactly.
this.
Yeah, because especially I think about this all the time when I'm trying to help people with pain. It's a big one with pain because to get yourself out of pain, your brain has to dedicate a lot of energy to that. So if you get good results from an exercise or some kind of intervention, you feel better in the moment. Your brain has to then calculate, okay, what if this pain is gone? What does that mean for us? How are we going to move differently now? What are we going to do? How frequently are we going to do it? Do we have the energy to support that? And in that prediction process, if the answer is no, guess what? You're staying in pain.
They're locking it up. Yeah.
Yep. And that's probably the biggest problem that people face when it comes to trying to eliminate pain. And most people have no idea that
Yeah.
they don't think about it like that. They think more mechanical. Why is my shoulder still hurt? I did my exercises. And it could be bigger than that. It may be based on fuel.
Interesting. So you mentioned sitting at a computer and not just your posture, but your visual. Would you say your visual is your
your
vision
visual
is boxed
skills
in?
get boxed in. Yeah.
I spend so much time looking down into my hand where I have a tiny screen and just scrolling. It's terrible. And then when I'm editing podcasts or doing stuff, I'm at the computer staring at a screen. And then, I happen to enjoy the medium of television, and I watch Netflix, another screen that's also maybe a little further away, but not that different, right?
Yeah.
What can you do to train your visual system in a simple way? And is there a benefit to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Several things that come to mind. So if you happen to be an individual that spends a lot of time in front of the screen for work, right, like you, Tony, and then you do it, to enjoy, watching Netflix or something, you're definitely getting more screen time. One of the things that you can do during your work day is just take small breaks and, get outside and take walks and make sure that, you're looking to the horizon, right? You're looking to the horizon, which is going to use the opposite muscles as the ones that pull the eyes inward and converge our eyes. You're now going to be using more of the muscles on the outside of the eye that diverge. Okay, so that's the ideal scenario, is that you get outside, you walk, you look to the distance, and you build up some time doing that. It could be as simple as just turning your desk chair and looking out the window, right? And spending some time looking out the window into the distance. And it doesn't have to be a lot of time. There's something called the 20-20-20 rule that you sometimes hear about. I think it goes, for every 20 minutes of screen time, you pause and you look at something at least 20 feet away, but hopefully further. And you do that for 20 seconds, right? You'll hear that sometimes. Do I do that? No, I don't turn my desk chair, look out the window. I try to structure my workday around a few different walks where we can get outside, and the walk itself is going to build in that time where now I'm looking into the distance more. So that's one simple idea that really is good to interrupt your day when you have that screen time with other healthy habits that can kind of counter those fixed visual skills, right? So honestly, the next best thing, or maybe even better, is literally just training your eye muscles, right? We have lots of different exercises to do that. A couple different ones that are just easy to explain. So we've got an exercise called pencil push-ups, where you could hold a pen or a pencil in your hand, use it as a visual target by staring at the tip of it, or maybe a letter on the pen or the pencil. Hold it out at an arm's length and literally follow it into the tip of your nose and then back out again. And so you're literally doing pencil push-ups, right? And you are strengthening your eye muscles, both the set of muscles that pull the eyes in for convergence and then control and pull your eyes outward as you follow it away from your nose. And so that's one idea that can help mobilize your eye muscles. Another really good one is just eye circles. So again, a visual target, whether it's the tip of your finger or a pen again, and you're just looking at the target and you're creating a circle, right? And maybe that circle starts with like a really small diameter and then you kind of build it out, right? And then it's, really large. When you do this, you're not moving your neck. This is only eye motion. And so essentially what you're doing is taking your eyes through a full range of motion, just like we would want to take your joints and muscles, right, in your arms and legs through full ranges of motion. doing the same thing with your eye muscles is a really healthy for them. Because like we talked about, your eyes get boxed in, especially with all this time where, we have the screens in front of us, and
Mm-hmm.
you can actually develop eye muscle imbalances, right? So yeah, it's important. It's important. So we have all that stuff built into our program. A lot of those skills we talked about in the strength dojo, they utilize convergence, divergence. We've got other things called smooth pursuits where you're tracking targets.
Mm-hmm.
All of our vestibular drills do the same thing, right? Because you have to gaze fixate on a target as your head and neck is moving. It's just a really healthy thing to do.
Yeah. And I imagine most people haven't done anything to train their eyes. So
No.
this might be like newbie gains.
Yep. Yeah, there'll be some newbie gains there for sure. And gosh, I mean, there can be some unexpected results too. I mean, you can literally improve your visual acuity. I mean, up
Yeah.
until somewhat recently, it was thought that you could not make any improvements in your visual acuity. That has, I mean, that's been disproven now. There are still plenty of people in the camp that you cannot do it, especially and some of these people are eye doctors.
Mm-hmm.
Might not be good for business. So, but you can do it. You can do it. Does it take work? Yes, it does. Does it sometimes need to get super specific? Yeah, it does sometimes. But I know people that have done just general vision drills, meaning no specificity at all.
Mm-hmm.
Just do the basic vision drills that we teach. And their prescription is changing. They do
Yeah.
enough frequency that it's changing for the better. It's improving. So that's pretty cool.
That is really cool. I do wonder if there's certain things that are like degenerative with age and certain things that are
Yes.
degenerative with lack of use, right?
Yeah.
And that maybe those two things are both at work. I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm not an optometrist.
Yeah. I think so. I think so. That's a whole that goes to a place that I don't have a lot of experience with because I very rarely meet somebody that wants to put in that time to actually change their visual acuity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had a funny thing happen to me a long time ago. I was working with a woman who was new to all this stuff, right? She was coming to me for some pain issues. She was an older lady, did not have really any experience with even basic fitness. And I was helping her out with some pain stuff. And we started doing some breathing exercises because she definitely was a fuel case. And I started doing some vision exercises with her because she had really lousy vision. And it was just really obvious to me that her poor eyesight was a big
Mm-hmm.
driver of the threat that she was experiencing during the day.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, the part of the story that I find funny is that she got mad. She got mad at me because she went to her eye doctor and her prescription changed and she had just bought glasses and I didn't expect it to change. Like I was just doing what I knew would be healthy for her. I did not,
Yeah.
but you talk about newbie gains, right? Like this person had been boxed in with her poor habits for her entire life and she wore super thick glasses,
Mm-hmm.
classical like forward head posture, like poor, posture just all around, mouth breather, just different breathing issues that needed to, be addressed and fuel issues. And so I started giving her the fuel that she needed while trying to support her with vision training, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
vision training is actually very energy expensive, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Unbelievably energy expensive. You wouldn't think so because you're like doing these little movements with your eyes.
Yeah.
But if somebody is at all sensitive to running out of fuel, or they're sensitive to just vision exercises by themselves, which is a thing, you can see some pretty negative responses that come on rather quickly with those individuals because the idea of vision training is so energy expensive. Like as humans, we learn to compensate at a very amazing level with our eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you interrupt that And now you're saying, hey, I want you to learn this skill with your eyes, and you don't allow people to compensate it and cheat it. Hugely energy expensive. And so
So do
there's,
these in small doses and
yeah, it starts
assess.
out in small doses. You wouldn't do pencil push-ups for 30 reps if you've never done it before. If you did that, you'd probably wake up the next day with sore eye muscles, or you would get some tension around your eyes in the moment of trying to do that,
Hmm.
which is interesting. It usually starts at a very small dose, and you build up from there. When I was doing vision drills with that particular woman, we were doing very small doses, and she noticed that she felt better from it combined with the right breathing exercises. And I still remember she got mad because her prescription improved, and she was like, can this really happen? And I was like, yeah, it can. I wasn't like, that wasn't the goal, but she was literally mad about it. And I was like, oh, this
Um,
is too much for me. Like, you're mad because your eyes are improving only because you just bought new glasses.
well, they're
And
expensive,
yeah,
man.
they are.
Yeah, I always every time I walk out of there, I'm like, I can't believe I just spent all that money on glasses.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, they are. I wear contact lenses most of the time, but I have glasses for like at home and stuff. If
yeah.
I just don't like my glasses, like they do something weird to my. Put it this way, I feel it in terms of proprioception. Like when
Mm-hmm.
I wear glasses, I think because the prescription is only true in the exact center of the lens, that when
Yeah, there's
my
some distortion.
yes, when my eyes deviate away from that, because I'm used to being able to do that with contact lenses, I get a it's a very subtle sense of different proprioception.
Mm-hmm.
It really just irritates me. So I don't wear my glasses that much unless I'm just at home and I know I'm going to be in one place. I don't need to move around a lot.
So let me ask you this: when you're doing visual drills, should you be, if you have glasses, should you be wearing them or should you not be wearing them?
Yeah, I get that question a ton. So that is goal dependent. Okay.
Hmm.
So I always tell people, if you're doing one of our workouts and you're in the skill session and you feel like wearing your glasses, giving yourself that increased visual acuity is helping you from a performance standpoint, then keep your glasses on, right? Because we're trying to perform at a higher level when you're working out.
Yeah.
If you're an individual that's trying to solve some eye muscle imbalances, visual issues, then you have to take your glasses off. So it's sort of goal dependent. If it's general training, I usually say keep them on if you're comfortable. Some people will tell you their acuity is so lousy that when they take them off, they really wouldn't want to exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Other people, it's not so bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so it also depends on, how is your vision to start with. Personally, for me, I would much rather work out with my contact lenses in. There are times where I work out without them and I'm fine, but it adds this extra level of like, it's just a little irritating.
Yeah.
And when I'm at jujitsu, once in a great while, I lose a contact lens when I'm
Mm.
rolling. And it pisses me off because now I've got one contact in and I
Mm-hmm.
can see through that, and it kind of like distorts things a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I can understand how like training without the lenses can be obnoxious. But if you plan on fixing your visual skills or improving them with vision training drills, you have to take your glasses off or your contact lenses out because you need to start training the weak system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. At some point, I've been looking into like VR headsets just
Hmm.
because they're I think they're starting to get interesting. Like it's starting to get to the point where this could be really cool.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's so much neuroscience there
Oh,
in
man.
terms of vestibular, what's matching with your proprioceptive versus what you're
Dude.
seeing,
I mean, that's kind of
vision.
scary. Like,
Yeah.
what if they become the norm? And of course, kids are going to be using them.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Strapped in.
a question in my mind is, could that contribute to some kind of sensory mismatch? Right? If you use them enough, right? I don't know the answer, but it's like one of the things I think about.
Yeah, I think for in my gut instinct is yes. By
Yeah.
definition, it's sort of creating. a sensory mismatch.
Yeah. Now,
On
could
purpose,
we?
because it's trying to
Yeah.
transport you to a place that you're not, right? It's
Yes.
trying to
Now,
trick your brain into thinking you're somewhere else.
that's right. The other side of that is, could we use them for rehab? All right.
Hmm.
So, could you use the visual input to help somebody learn how to walk again? Right?
Fuck
Because,
yeah, dude.
so it's like there's going to be so many weird and cool things that might come from that. Yeah. So,
Yeah, maybe that'll be like a future episode. Like we get a headset and
yeah.
see what we can do with it.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Very cool. Any other low hanging fruit that you just want to put out there before we wrap this one up?
We touched on most of it. So, proprioceptive training for sure. The main feature there being joint mobility.
Mm-hmm.
Vestibular training. The main thing there being the different vestibular reflexes that we can train. But you know what? I just realized I left out of that I should just mention quickly now is that you don't need to be doing a specific vestibular reflex kind of drill in order to be training your vestibular system, right? Because this is a system that is helping you move through the world by helping you understand which way is up and which way you're
Mm-hmm.
traveling. And that means that things like jumping and running and skipping and spinning
Mm-hmm.
and rolling and all those kinds of playful things that we can do activate your vestibular system and do fit into the category of vestibular training. So
Yeah.
in our skills session, I teach lots of rolling, shoulder rolls, forward shoulder rolls, backward shoulder rolls, lots of different ground movements that require you to invert, right? It starts looking like
Mm-hmm.
jujitsu, of course. It's a big
Mm-hmm.
inspiration for it. Um, Gymnastic type movements, or just all these little playful things that maybe we grew up doing, basic playground skipping,
Yeah.
all that stuff is also still vestibular training. And it's important that it's in your life to some degree, because when I look at it, I think that vestibular training and impact, things like jumping and landing,
Mm-hmm.
I think that as a person ages, accidentally they start going without that form of stimulus, without knowing it.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden you find yourself in a place and you have not jumped or landed or done any spinning or rolling or whatever, and you haven't done that for 25 years,
Mm.
right? Accidentally. That's a problem, because that's now such a lack of input to the system. That's why we like to build these things into our program. And we have people in their 70s in our program doing shoulder rolls. I think it's
Cool.
awesome. Not
That's
everybody
cool.
has the courage to go after
Yeah.
those skills, and we give lots of different options and regressions, modifications, so that people can pick a starting point and just kind of build their confidence from there. But I just think that's so cool. We have 70-year-olds in the program that are rolling forwards and backwards and jumping and spinning. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's badass.
All right, that's it, Tony. There's a little bit on the low-hanging fruit for the general population in terms of training. And remember, we're talking about training your brain and your body. If you want to learn more about that, you can get involved in our programs. The Strength Dojo is loaded with all of those training inputs so that, well, you don't have to think about those things, and we can build your workout for you. Now is a good time to remind everybody that coming up very soon, we're going to be starting our enrollment for the Neuro Dojo. And the Neuro Dojo is our more specialized and advanced course where we go deeper into the study of applied neurology. Whether you are a fitness enthusiast, a lifelong student of movement, or even a movement practitioner or therapist, this course would be amazing for you, because you're going to learn how to actually train the brain and help people eliminate pain and move better. Now, what you need to know about this is that very soon we are doing a free masterclass webinar that will be an introduction to the material that you're going to learn in the Neuro Dojo. And that is coming up August 21st. So make sure that you check out both the link in the show notes to get on the wait list so that we can tell you about that webinar, or you can go directly to our website, get on that wait list, and we will email you with more information on the free masterclass as soon as it's here at the end of August. Very last, thank you guys so much for your support. This podcast is picking up momentum thanks to you and thanks to Tony. If you wouldn't mind going and giving us a 5-star review, it really helps. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you soon. Maybe we won't see you soon, but you'll hear us soon.